Hello, and welcome to another episode of My Golden Life. I'm your host, Lisa Neller, and today's topic is how to overcome emotional spending. And because I'm not an expert in money and finance, I've asked Christine Luken to join me today to share her expertise in this area. As the founder of the Financial Dignity Movement, Christine has coached hundreds of high earning professionals, business owners, and divorcing women to pay off staggering amounts of debt and massively increase their net worth. The author of 4 books and host of the Wealthy Woman Book Club, Christine blends wise money management with emotional intelligence. When she's not connecting with her global online community or coaching clients from her office in beautiful Kentucky, you can find this host of the top 10% global podcast, Money is Emotional, on the golf course, by the pool, or curled up with a good book, a fluffy cat, and a hot beverage. So, welcome, Christine. I'm so glad you agreed to join me today. I'm really honored because I know you have been doing this a long time. So, thank you.
Yes. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So let's dig right in. Before we get into some of the questions I have for you, tell us your story and how you ended up being a financial coach for women.
Yes. Well, it wasn't something that I intended to do, and it's not because I have always done things perfectly myself. In fact, it is quite the opposite. So, at age 26, despite being an accountant, despite working for a multi-million dollar manufacturing company, preparing their budget and doing their accounting, I found myself in debt with a terrible credit score, having to park my vehicle about a half a mile away from where I lived so that the bank would not come get it. I
Oh,
felt
okay.
like a complete and total hypocrite. So, the long story short of how I got there is I was engaged to a guy with terrible money habits. He was in and out of jobs and even in and out of jail. And I thought if I loved him enough that he would change. And he did. He got worse. Thankfully, I didn't marry him. Thankfully, I came to my senses before then. But I had no money to leave and I was in a hole. So I had to reach out to my family to help me get a fresh start. And so as I was repairing my financial situation, I got very curious about why smart people like me, who had an accounting degree and who knew what I should be doing with money, like, how do we make these dumb financial decisions? And I realized at the core of it was emotions. And if we do not understand how money and emotions are connected, if we don't learn how to properly manage our emotions, then they can hijack our wallets or our purses. And that's exactly what happened to me. So, it was obviously a process for me to rebuild my finances and my credit. And what I realized was now you have to remember that this was back in the early 2000s. No one was talking about money mindset. No one was talking about behavioral finance. In fact, behavioral finance was in its infancy as a branch of psychology, which I had always been interested in psychology. So I actually got a minor in psychology despite having a major in accounting. And it was just because I loved the psychology classes so much. So I really started to dive into the psychology behind why people do what they do and how emotions affect people's behavior with money. And my coaching business grew out of, helping friends and family who had been in similar situations. And then, I found out like, oh, there's a way to be certified as a financial coach. And honestly, I didn't think about making a career out of it because I was making 6 figures as an accountant. Um, But I'm like, I'm already helping people do this. I better make sure I'm doing the right things. I'm helping them in the right way. And once I took that certification and I saw the transformation, right? Like once I put together those skills with my knowledge and my experience, and of course, coming to the situation, being very humble and saying, look, you don't have to be ashamed about what you've done because I've done it all too. And we can get on the other side of this. I just loved the transformation. I fell in love with helping people to get from that place of financial shame, embarrassment, disorganization to that place of peace and financial dignity. And so I quit my job. I quit my job 12 years ago and went full time into coaching, and I haven't looked back.
Oh man, what a great story. I think what I want to know now before we get into the emotional aspect of buying, um, what are some of the things you did right up front to get back into financial shape? Because I remember you telling me, and I heard this on your podcast interview too, that once you got back in financial shape, you started to recognize that you weren't worried about money anymore. So how did you
Hmm.
get from, island A where you're, in debt and all of that to island B where you're like, I don't worry about money anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, what'd you do?
Well, it's a lot of baby steps.
Okay.
And I will be honest, when I first broke up with my ex and I moved in to my dad's spare bedroom, I was very overwhelmed because every single piece of my finances was a disaster. And I really didn't know where to start first. And so my dad said, "Let's get all your bills. Let me help you get a handle on this." And I think there was a really great value in having someone that was not emotionally attached to my mess be able to look at things and say, okay, let's do this first. And so that's what we would meet every week. And he would give me like one or two things to do for the week. It's like, I want you see this little bill for $100 when you get your paycheck? I want you to pay that one off. Don't worry about anything else. Just do that for this week. And then we'll regroup next week. And it's almost like I felt like my financial house had been hit by a tornado, right? So if you could just imagine your house being hit by a tornado, you open up the front door, the back wall is blown out, everything is a disaster. You just want to slam the door and walk away from it. Well, my dad did the equivalent of just like turning my head and saying, "Do you see this coat closet? Don't look at the rest of the house. Just get this coat closet in order and just forget everything else for now and just do this." And so that was extraordinarily helpful for me. And if I would have to give people a list of priorities, I would say the very first thing you want to do is figure out where all your money is going, because it's very hard to pay down debt, it's very hard to save if your spending isn't under control. And the first piece of that is just knowing where it's all going, because you will naturally course correct if you can see things in black and white. There's a lot of great personal finance apps out there that are 100% free. The one that I use has a small cost. It's called Monarch Money. But honestly, it doesn't really matter which one you use. It just matters that you use something. Because for most people, we're spending on multiple credit cards, we're spending out of bank accounts, we're spending on Venmo and PayPal. And if you're sharing finances with your spouse or partner, then they're doing the same thing. So you may have 12 or 13 buckets that spending is coming out of. How do you know what you're spending on groceries unless you have a tool that pulls it all together and says, here's exactly what you're spending on groceries, or here's exactly what you're spending on entertainment? And then when you see those numbers, if you're like, wow, that we're spending way too much on that, right? People instinctively know, like, wow, that's a lot of money. I didn't think we were spending that much on there. Just being mindful of that helps you to start course correcting and discovering the things that you're paying for that you're not even using.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see how spending gets out of hand and how you can have so many buckets and you don't know what you're spending your money on. It's funny because I'm going to go through now after we do this, I'm going to go through my own and just see. But
Yeah.
but so before I get to my next question, how long did it take you to get out of debt and into where you were feeling pretty good?
Well, so here's the thing. I was not completely out of debt when I got to the point of feeling good. About a year afterwards, I was feeling good because I didn't have anything in collections anymore. So I had cleared up everything that was past due. I had paid off the vast majority of my credit card debt. So I probably paid more than 50% of it off by that time. The most important thing was I had a plan and I was working my plan and I could see consistent progress. That's when I started to feel better. It probably took me 2 years to get completely out of debt. Um, but I think once you have a plan and you see that you are improving month after month and you're crossing stuff off the list as far as getting debts paid off, etc., that's so satisfying.
Um, well, that's great. So people who, because it takes typically years of people spending the way they do, right? Their habits and
Yeah.
everything to get them where they are. So if it only takes you a couple of years to get out of that, and maybe sometimes less for some people, and maybe sometimes a little more for people, um,
Yeah.
but that feels so much better than the other because I think our society promotes debt. The credit
Oh,
cards,
absolutely.
right? Like it's like buy this, you need this. All the marketing is you need this. And then, the credit card companies let you pay $10 a month for a $5,000 bill, that kind of thing.
I
So you're paying
know.
an exorbitant amount of money in interest. Um, where was I going with that? Oh, but I was just going to say there's something about being in debt that feels really bad for people. It just
Yeah.
feels bad. And there is no shame. My husband he's an attorney and he did bankruptcy for many years and just saw what people were spending their money on and what they would not
Hmm.
give up,
Yeah.
which was not stuff they really truly needed. Had nothing to do with food and electricity.
Hmm.
Um, I get the psychology piece. I really think that everyone at some point in their lives, no matter what their troubles are, whatever part of their lives their troubles are in, they come to the psychology. They come to like, why did I do that? Why am
Yeah.
I how could I have let myself do that? And then they want to know. And so then they get into a study.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what did you learn? What did you learn about the psychological side or emotional side of money?
Well, it's very interesting because actually it was a year or two after I wrote my book, Money is Emotional, that I found out that scientists have proven that it is impossible to make a purely logical decision because the moment of decision happens in the same part of our brain that processes emotion. So we cannot make a purely logical decision about anything. Now, that doesn't mean that logic doesn't come into the equation. This is the way I like to explain it. So you have two voices going when you're getting ready to spend money. You have the voice of reason and you have the voice of emotion. We can think about these like two different radio stations. The voice of reason is very consistent, it's very calm, it's very soothing. You can think about it like the music that you hear in a department store or an elevator, right? It's kind of like that classical music that's just kind of going in the background. The voice of emotion, however, is more like a top 40 radio station where You might have a soft, sweet love song by Ed Sheeran, but then you've got some booty bouncing Beyonce, right, as your very next song. Our emotions are like that. We've got this steady voice of reason, but then the emotion it's up and down depending on what's going on. The best financial decisions are made when your emotions are quiet and you can hear the voice of reason. Now, this doesn't mean that you tune out your emotions. You actually want to be able to check in with both because you and I both know that, and I've done this before, where a financial decision looks smart on paper, but I have a bad feeling about it. If I go against that gut feeling, it never turns out well. So we don't want to discount our emotions. But what we want to do when we are entering into any kind of financial decision, whether it's spending or deciding whether we're going to change our investments or whatever, we have to say, how loud are my emotions right now?
Mm.
And if they are very loud, then we need to do something about that. And there's a couple of different things that we can do to turn down the volume on emotions. Our emotions are not wrong, right? They're part of being human. So we don't want to stuff them down because stuffing them does not work and they will end up popping out like an evil jack in the box at the worst at the worst time. So we need to say, okay, what is this emotion and how do I honor it and process it? So for example, if you're feeling mad, and this happens a lot with the women who I coach through divorce, like they're pissed off at their ex because they did something and out of anger, they may want to do what I call revenge spending. Well, if he bought that, then I can buy this. All right. You are angry and that is a legitimate emotion. Let's go for a run. Let's go to a smash room where you can break windows and vases with a baseball bat. Let's go take a kickboxing class. Let's move that angry energy out of our body. If you're sad, some people soothe themselves with spending. I used to have a client who would do what she called bathtub spending. She would, when she was sad, she would make herself like this luxurious bath and she would have her phone there and she would spend. She would spend money. And I said, we have to stop bathtub spending. So it's like, if you're sad, go watch The Notebook and cry over somebody else's problems and let all that sadness out. And then once your emotions are quiet, then we can revisit the situation because most financial decisions, most spending decisions do not need to happen within a 5-minute window. And I know salespeople will use these techniques against us and say, well, there's only 3 left. Well, miraculously, tomorrow there will be 5 more, I promise.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of, some of the things that I buy and if I could really look at if you're saying that one spending decision is made without emotion, I've got to really look at that because I don't really spend a lot of money on things other than what I think I need, other than, things I think I need other than food and, that kind of thing. What I need is books, and what I need is an occasional Starbucks, but not every day, maybe twice a month, you know. Are these emotional decisions as well?
No, 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 no.
Okay.
There's a
Okay.
big decision. Well, every every spending, every financial decision is an emotional decision. There's an emotional component of all of it. But here's the thing. Money's job is to support your happiness. And if books make you happy, if delicious coffee makes you happy, then you absolutely need to work that into your spending plan. It's about being intentional. It's not
Mm.
about depriving ourselves. So when you look at the important goals in your life, are you working towards those while you're also having enjoyment? So I call this the balance between provider money and pleasure money. So if you think about the easiest way to describe this is with an analogy. The circus trapeze. In order for the trapeze artist to have a good experience, they need two pieces of equipment. They need the trapeze swing, but they also need the safety net. If they have a swing and no safety net, that's not fun. That's terrifying. If there is a safety net and there is no swing, then you've missed the point entirely. So what we need to do is make sure that our financial safety net is in place. Do we have margin? Do we have money in savings in case something goes wrong? Are we saving for the future? Do we have the right insurances in place? Do we know where our spending is going? Do we have our basic needs covered? Right? So once we know that we've got that safety net, then we are free to spend on the things that make us happy without feeling guilty about it. It's just about being intentional.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Why is it important that we learn to be both financially and emotionally intelligent?
Mm. Well, because you need both of those. So, unfortunately, we have not been taught the basics of personal finance. I like to say that sex and money are very similar. No one teaches us anything about it. We're supposed to be great at it, but it's not polite to talk about it. How are we supposed to be good at something if no one really formally teaches us anything and we can't ask any questions? So when it comes to money, there's a diverse amount of information out there. And we want to make sure that we are sourcing our financial information from reputable sources. I have people come to me and say, well, I watched this guy on TikTok and he said X, Y, and Z about cryptocurrency. And I'm like, all right, let's calm down here. What sort of qualifications does this person have? Are they just trying to sell you a course on how to make money in cryptocurrency? So we want to make sure that the people that we're learning from are experts in their field and that they also have results. If I have a discovery call with someone and they say, and this maybe happens one out of every 50 discovery calls that I do with people, they'll straight up ask me, what is your net worth? And I'll say, if you want to hold on 1 second, I will pull up a screen share and I will show you in Monarch what my net worth is. So that you're learning from someone that has been there and has done that and has the results. So we want to make sure that we are sourcing our financial information from good places. And then we also need to understand our not just emotional intelligence in general. Yes, that's important, but we need to know what our own emotional triggers are. And typically there may be certain situations where you realize when X, Y, and Z happens, that's when I make bad financial decisions. For example, there was one woman who, every time she would drop her son off to her ex husband's house for visitation, first of all, she didn't like him. She wasn't happy with him. She was lonely because she was in the house by herself. She would go and buy shoes. And she had so many shoes that she couldn't even wear them all. But she didn't even make the connection that she had all these unprocessed feelings around her divorce that she needed to take care of, and that she also needed something to fill this loneliness need, right? So maybe she needed to join a running club or a book club or take up a hobby, or make plans with her best friend when she knew that her ex was going to have her son and she was going to be by herself. And then also knowing what particular categories are problematic for you. So, like you, I love buying books, and I know that sometimes can get out of control for me. There are certain areas for me, it's books and it's crystals. Like I am obsessed.
Ah,
But I literally have a line in my budget for those things. So, I have I have fun money that I can spend on those things, but there are parameters around that. And you might need to switch some of those categories temporarily to cash. If you set a category dollar amount and you say, okay, I'm only spending X amount on this and you always go over, you might want to switch it over to cash so that you have to physically pull out the denominations to buy what it is that you want to buy because that will make you think twice about it.
I have a question about, the buzzwords about around money right now are money is energy and money is spiritual. Is there
Yeah.
anything you want to say about those two things, either one of those two things?
Yeah, well, my newest book is Provider Money, Pleasure Money, The Energetics of Personal Finance, and that's exactly what I talk about is how you have these two types of energies in your personal finances, that you have this provider energy that is there to support you and take care of you and to meet your safety needs, but then you also have this pleasure energy. Um, which is all about enjoying life because there's no award for having the most money when you die. That's
Yeah.
not the point of it. Money's job is to support your happiness. And so you can't be happy if you don't have a sense of safety first. So that's why those both of those energies fall under that same umbrella of supporting your happiness because it's hard to be happy if you're not feeling safe, and it's hard to be happy if you don't have any pleasure or excitement. And it certainly feels like money is more energetic now because people are largely disconnected from actual cash. And sometimes it does help to re-engage with your cash, especially if you're somebody that is very tactile oriented. I always tell people if one of your love languages is touch, you may want to physically get back in touch with your money. Um, and yes, there is a lot of mindset that goes along with that. I think the problem that I have is when people just teach one side of it or the other. So money is practical, money is emotional. There is the provider piece of it, there is the pleasure piece of it. There is the mindset work, but there also are the practical daily habits. You need both of those two things working together. So, yes, manifesting does work, but you have to take action. It's not just it's not just having your prosperity crystals and saying your mantras. You still need to get your personal finance app and pay your bills on time and shop around for the best interest rates and do those practical things as well. So it's not about either or, it's definitely about both.
Yeah, and I think it's about an exchange of value, right? Like when we talk about money being energy, it's really like, well, I produce this and I sell this and you get this value.
Hmm.
And sometimes I guess I guess we don't need the value. Sometimes we just spend when we, like you said, emotionally, when we are upset, when we're angry, when we're sad, those kinds of
Hmm.
things. So I love what you're doing because you're helping women get in touch with these things. Financial literacy, for one, I would imagine you teach some of that. Is that correct? Or okay, so
Yeah.
financial literacy. You want to talk about that at all? Or
Yeah. Well, I've obviously my first book, Money is Emotional, is packed full of financial literacy. But what's different about that book is that it also talks about the emotional components. So there's a section about budgeting, there's a section about saving, there's a section about debt, etc. And I talk about the emotional landmines that people encounter in those areas and give them very practical tools to help them with both the practical side of it and the emotional side of it. Um, One of my most fun ways that I am doing financial literacy right now is inside the Wealthy Woman Book Club, where each and every month we are reading a different book about money. We're having discussions. There are group coaching sessions where we talk about the book. People can ask me any questions, whether it's relative to the book or not. And we encompass the whole entire picture. We're talking about the mindset, we're talking about the emotions, and we're talking about the practical things that we need to do. And it's in a no judgment zone, judgment free zone.
Judgment-free zone, and you have a committed community, from what I understand.
Yes. Yeah.
So, is there anything else you want to say about emotional money?
Yes. Well, one of the things that I will say is if you have been asking yourself this question because you're not where you want to be with your money, if you've been saying, what's wrong with me? You're asking the wrong question. The right question is, what happened to me? What happened to me that is causing me to interact with money in this way? Because there's always something that happened to us in the past that created the pattern that we're living out now. And if we don't like the way we're interacting with our money right now, we sometimes need to go back and say, where did this all start? Where did this negative programming happen? So that we can get to the bottom of it and we can start fresh.
Wonderful. And I think women in particular need to know that they have the ability to do hard things. You have
Yeah.
the ability to change and learn and grow, develop new skills, develop new understandings, and develop a whole load of confidence that you never thought you had. So don't lose hope. If
Yes.
if you're going through a divorce or you've been struggling with debt,
Mhm.
don't lose hope. Get some help. Christine's here to help you. So,
Yes.
Christine, where can people find you? I love the fact that you're doing this book club. So,
Yeah.
that and your website and all that. Tell us where.
Yeah, actually, you can find everything on the website. So if you go to christineluken.com, you'll find links to the book club, you'll find links to the Money is Emotional podcast, all of my books, all of my courses. And if you just search my name on all the major social media platforms, you'll find me there too.
Fabulous. Well, Christine, thank you so much for enlightening us about the emotional side of money. I think you gave us some really good ideas, or you gave us some good pictures of what it might look like to spend emotionally. And then you've got the helps and the tips and the strategies to help women overcome that. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Have a fabulous week, and we'll see you next time.